Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. So in today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different from my normal kind of video. And we're going to talk about ruling out health issues before you start doing any work on yourself in terms of mental or emotional health, in terms of therapy. A lot of times, a lot of the issues that express themselves as psychological or emotional things can have a very physical basis. This is one of those things that is kind of not really discussed about or asked about with your typical therapist. And so this is something we kind of have to be responsible for on our own. So if you're someone who's trying to sort out how you ended up with whatever your issue you have, you may want to watch this because this might be a really useful piece of information for you. So watch on. But before we go ahead and get into the main content here, let's just get some caveats out of the way so we are both clear, you the viewer and me the video maker here, about my level of expertise on this topic. So let's be absolutely crystal clear. I'm not a health expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a med student. I'm not even a serious student of biology and health and nutrition. I'm not a nutritionalist. I'm none of those things. I'm literally just a person who has had to work through my own health issues as part of sorting out some of the problems I've had in my own path to well-being in my own life here. So, as someone who has done the work to really align myself with thriving and being in alignment with well-being, and as someone who now as a coach, as a hypnotherapist and a coach, I serve other people around their process and evolution towards well-being. This is a topic that I've had to deal with on my own. So I'm just speaking from this place of my own observation, my own personal experience, the articles and the studies that I have read, and just what I see also as a coach and a hypnotherapist with people coming in. So please do take everything I say with a fat grain of salt. Do consider it just a perspective and an idea from just a random person on the internet, okay? I'm not an expert when it comes to health. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let me go ahead and just set the stage of what I want to talk about here a little bit with you and give you a little context as to why I'm making this video in the first place. So first of all, I've gotten a few recent requests, some from viewers on the channel here, some from people in my group coaching, some from people on Reddit. I've gotten multiple requests to make a video and talk about this topic. So I know this is an area of interest for a bunch of you out there. This is something that I feel like is another one of these, I'm kind of trending along this line of these topics of things that therapists don't do or don't say or don't share with you or don't put forth that maybe you should know as part of your own personal healing, personal growth, transformation process, right? And this is one of those things that I think we have to really be aware of when it comes to what the root cause of our issue is and why we have it. See, the problem is when you go to a therapist, a lot of times therapists are only seeing through the lens of therapy. They're only seeing through that particular worldview, which kind of assumes as a default mechanism that when someone has a personal issue, that its root cause is most likely to be mental or emotional, probably developmental, probably early childhood stuff, yada, yada, right? You go see a psychiatrist, they're probably going to think whatever problem is neurochemical and that you have a brain imbalance of some sort, and they're probably going to try to prescribe you a medication, right? Likewise, you go to a doctor, they're probably going to think it's something physical. So every profession has its own kind of bias of worldview, and often these people are so in their worldview and in their particular paradigm that they're not always thinking outside of it or beyond it, even if they're aware of information from other paradigms, right? This is just kind of commonly what we see with people who are really good or really specialized. Okay, you get my point, I'm sure. So one of the problems I hear a lot from clients, it's one of the problems I dealt with myself when I last went to go see a therapist, is that a lot of times, a good chunk, let's say, of the time that you have a mental health or an emotional health issue, you've got something like depression or anxiety or something is not right. You're, lethargic, you have anhedonia, you're whatever. A lot of times these symptoms, and let's be clear, they're symptoms, they're descriptors of processes and effects and experience happening in their body, in your body, rather. A lot of times when we go to a doctor with these symptoms, and it's a therapist, they're gonna just treat it like it's a therapy scenario and not really ask you, hey, what's your lifestyle like, right? What's your relationship with sleep? What's your diet like right now? Are you exercising right now? What's your social life like right now? What are your family relationships like right now? Et cetera, and get at least a basic view of what's going on with you and your life as a more holistic picture that really includes your lifestyle. And I think this is important to point out because if you're going to therapy, to try to sort out an issue that's actually rooted in something physical, that's based in lifestyle, then you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. You're probably spending time and emotional investment and money to try to get a resolution from a path that may not really be the thing that's going to get you there. So we want to rule out any physical causes before you do therapy, especially something as extreme as psychedelic therapy. Not that psychedelics are invalid. I love them. I think they're important. But before you're kind of like reaching to the extreme end of the therapy spectrum, maybe you should start with something a little more basic, like making sure you're getting good sleep, you're getting good, diet, you're exercising properly. Because let's be honest, most of us in this day and age in our culture have pretty shitty lifestyles, or at least a lot of us. It's very common for people to overeat junk food, to binge watch media that's not great for you, so overly sedentary, to not move enough, not exercise enough, or to exercise too hard and max ourselves out and blow ourselves out, to pull late nights, to obviously abuse, alcohol or drugs. That's kind of been there since the 70s at least. There's all these lifestyle factors, that can very easily pile up and leave us feeling like shit and feeling really dysregulated and out of sorts. And I'll be honest here, this is something, that I was guilty of for a very long time and didn't start to get together until probably midway into my 30s, if I'm being frank with you guys. And what I've seen is most of the people who really feel the impacts of lifestyle generally tend to be in their 30s and onward is really when it becomes obvious. In your 20s, you definitely feel it, but you still have kind of youth and health on your side. And so you can kind of get away with more. You can kind of really be a little more cavalier and extreme with how you're living your life and bounce back from it and, feel okay. It might make you give you a low level depression or low level anxiety or whatever that you're kind of like just, ignoring. But as you get older, these things become more prevalent. Last thing I want to say in this kind of intro setup before we talk about some of the main points here, is that I would encourage you to entertain and explore all of this. I'm going to kind of point you towards some ideas. I'm not going to give you a lot of reference materials, but I'm just going to kind of name things. I would encourage you to go look them up, read the science, check the articles, really explore some of these ideas for yourself so that you can really make the connection and see that I'm not totally just talking out my ass here from feelings, that this is based on a lot of things I've read and looked at and seen and also lived and experienced. So if you are struggling to feel good, to feel positive, to feel energetic, to feel focused, to feel balanced, if you're kind of like too high, too low, et cetera, first place to start is going to be with lifestyle factors. So let's go ahead and talk about it a bit. I want to give some examples here of kind of some of the basic things that you should, more or less tweak. And I'll give some examples of how this plays out in terms of mental, emotional health that maybe you don't know about. And we'll kind of wrap it up from there. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's address the first of the three major areas of life that you really should be looking at if you're having some sort of mental, emotional health imbalance, let's say. So the first one is obviously going to be diet. Diet is the foundation of your health. Diet, all three of these are the foundation of your health as far as I'm concerned. But diet especially, the inputs into your body literally shape the outputs of your nervous system, if you want to think of it that way. And so this is the first thing to adjust. People love to hum and haw and squirm, get upset and rebellious because, let's be honest, diet is incredibly personal. It's incredibly intimate. It's often the way in a lot of our family systems that we learn how to emotionally regulate or self-regulate. It's our place that we can reliably go for a little hit of dopamine and pleasure and comfort. There are connotations to well-being, to social belonging, to feeling loved, to feeling nourished, to feeling safe, all wrapped up in diet. So diet has a lot tied into it. I will say personally, I did not have a great diet most of my youth and my 20s. And then I went, and this is personal opinion, I'm not recommending any particular diet for you, but I would say in general, you want to start eating more fresh, whole foods, right? I don't mean whole foods at the store. I mean non-packaged, non-canned, not in bags, non-preservative laden, organic, fresh, healthy food, as a baseline. You can have little exceptions and little indulgences here and there, but I think having 80% of your diet be kind of whole, fresh foods is kind of a good way to go. If you're vegetarian, I have no comment on that. If you're vegan, I have no comment on that. Do you? For me, that was something I tried for a very long time, but ultimately arrived back at eating some meat. And so what I was going to say just a moment ago is around 2011, I switched my diet up personally and went paleo. And then I've played with different variations of paleo and kind of gone off paleo for stretches and gone back on it, done keto, even played with carnivore for a moment. So I've tried different iterations of low inflammation diets is kind of the idea there. And there is an adjustment period when you switch your diet, especially if you cut out carbs and sugar to a really aggressive degree like I did with paleo, and you're really just focusing on real simple foods and doing different things like, eating, more of like a hearty, savory meal for breakfast. As you make these changes, it can be difficult, right, at first. But generally speaking, what I found is I switched my diet up and I started to eat cleaner, I started to eat more consistently and better portions and kind of more balanced in terms of micronutrients and macronutrients. What I found is a lot of my stress and anxiety dialed down. I lost a bunch of weight that I've been struggling with. My sense of satiation and energy went up. I felt like I had more focus throughout the day. I felt like I could go off of just a meal or two. And it really was a life-changing experience and a leveling up of what I expected in terms of feeling for myself throughout the day. So I would highly recommend, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever your preferences are, that you play with this first. If if you're like, I'm depressed, and I'll give some examples further on, but if you're like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have sudden panic attacks, I get dizzy spells, I get sudden, moments of just feeling super like angry and, grumpy for no reason. All this kind of stuff can easily be driven by diet and a lot more. And by diet, there's kind of two sides of the coin. There's eating stuff maybe that doesn't suit your body, that your body doesn't like or doesn't agree with, and that can cause problems. And then there's also not eating things that maybe you need. So you're malnourished of certain micronutrients or, minerals, that kind of a thing. And that can dramatically impact your mental, emotional well-being. So this is a huge place to start, because if you get this right, then you've ruled it out. Then once you have a diet that's really working for you, your gut health is good, your physical health is good from diet, you've ruled that out. If you still have issues, you've at least eliminated that from being one of the causal things. So start there. I think it's a great first intervention to do. I will say, before we go ahead and jump to the next section here, I think all three of these are kind of the low-hanging fruit of massive life improvement. I think bang for your buck, if you improve your diet, and the next two I'm going to talk about, which are going to be sleep and exercise, you get those three things right, that is going to be a massive, massive life transformation for very little effort in terms of feeling a lot better. So this is the first place I think to start before therapy. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about exercise and sleep a bit. Okay, the other one that people hate to hear about, and again, I'm not like a specimen of perfect physical fitness yet. I intend to be, but the one that people hate to hear about along with diet is exercise. But these really do account for a massive part of feeling good. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're not exercising enough, intensely enough, frequently enough, or at all, to start to level up your exercise. And if you're not exercising at all, if you're essentially sedentary, a great way to start would be just to start walking, just start moving, try to get 10,000 steps in a day. Get like your phone often has a step meter, or, get like a Fitbit or something like that. Count your steps and see if you can start to walk 10,000 steps a day. In addition to that, I think doing some sort of cardio is good. Some sort of weightlifting is good. Even if you're someone who doesn't fancy themselves as a weightlifter and you don't want to be like super jacked, it's not about that. But I think moving your body. So there are a couple things to know here. First of all, in case you haven't heard, there are plenty of studies, multiple studies that show that exercise outperforms SSRIs for depression. So that's the first thing to know. Exercise is literally more of an antidepressant than any of the medication you could be prescribed. So, and it's free, depending on how you do it, and always available to you. And more than that, it not only lifts your mood, I've found that it really sharpens my cognition when I'm exercising, puts my sense of self and my sense of life into focus. So if you think about it, for our entire evolutionary history up until very recently, meaning the last maybe 200 years or so, we've, had to move a lot every day in order to really eat, live, survive, right? Whether we're talking about the vast majority of human history where we were hunter-gatherers and we're walking all the time, or whether you're talking about, the last couple thousand years, civilization where, maybe now we're living in cities, but life still requires a lot of, walking and physical effort to do things. And our body is organized around this. I don't know if you know, but our detox system, our lymph system, as far as I understand, which is essentially a filtration system that filters out toxins in our bloodstream, only works when we're moving. So there's not like an auto pump that pumps toxins out of your body. You literally have to move in order for the lymphatic system to do its thing. We're built to move. When you don't have enough movement, you're going to feel like shit. Guaranteed. Promise you. And so this is a huge one. And I think can be a source of way more enjoyment than a lot of people realize. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're not an exerciser yet, to start. Again, this is another huge low-hanging piece of fruit in terms of your own mental, emotional well-being. And so, yeah, along with diet, exercise. I don't care if that's, hikes, which are great. That's one of the things I love to do. Walks in parks, playing with an animal like a dog, whether that's, playing with people, whether that's a solo sport or a group sport, if you like competitive sports. I don't care if that's martial arts or dance, even more vigorous forms of yoga. I don't think it matters. Just move, and move a lot, move regularly. It's really deeply important for your sense of health. So the kind of reoccurring theme here, in case it's not clear from my point of view, from what I've read, from what I've learned, from what I've studied, is essentially we want to be putting ourselves more in alignment with how we are organized naturally. And the more we do that, generally, the better our mental and emotional health is. And the more we deviate from how human beings are organized naturally, the more we end up generally having anxiety, stress, rumination, depression. Things start to go off the rails for us, right? So this is something to be watching in general in your life. How in alignment am I with kind of the ancestral way that human beings lived? And where and how much, and that includes things like we're going to talk about in a moment with sleep, like light cycles and light exposure and how late you're up and staring at screens. That includes things like socializing, because human beings are social creatures who relied on each other to survive in nature for hundreds of thousands of years. And so again, same thing. If we are, self-isolating and not in alignment with that, that has implications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So enough said. Exercise. Can't recommend it enough. I'm not a huge exerciser kind of person, but it's made all the difference in the world, and it's just great. Just do it. And the third major, obvious, low-hanging piece of fruit, bang for your buck, got to get these right before you go to a therapist, because if not, maybe you're doing therapy on the wrong thing is sleep. You got to get your sleep right. So this is another one that a lot of people struggle with. Fortunately, this has never been a major area of struggle for me. I'm really grateful to be able to say that. But I did do some things that have really helped to optimize. So for example, you can see behind me, I have a curtain that's fairly thick. They are more or less blackout curtains. And while they aren't like tightly sealed to the walls, they block out enough light that I'm able to maintain a nice dark room. I also use an eye mask when I sleep. I go to sleep at a reasonable hour before midnight. I go to sleep consistently at the same night or same time every night. I, dole down my lights earlier in the evening. I, have filters for my computer screen. So if I'm going to be watching a screen like a movie, in the evening, it's not blasting me with blue light. All that stuff. Do all of that. Set yourself up, again, sleep and diet also diet and exercise rather also set you up for really good sleep. So this all fits together, right? Because when you're well slept, it supercharges your nervous system to be able to function better at things like exercise. So all of these really go together. So there's a lot of science that shows, and I've kind of nerded out on this and gone on tangents, where sleep is the biggest predictor in terms of health issues, disease, things like dementia and Alzheimer's, early death, heart disease. There's a huge long list of problems that are downstream from not getting proper sleep. A big piece of this for some of you out there will be sleep apnea. In other words, stopping breathing while you're sleeping. You may want to get some sort of a monitor and monitor that, watch that closely. Getting your sleep right makes all the difference. When I'm well slept, I know it. I wake up and I feel this deep, rejuvenated vitality, this power to the life force in my body that makes me feel really capable of whatever it is I need to do in the day. I have more energy, I have more focus, better mood, everything's easier, right? And when I am underslept or poorly slept, I'm more emotionally dysregulated, my focus goes to shit, my motivation goes to shit. Let me see what else happens. There's more cortisol in my nervous system, so I'm more likely to be anxious. Getting good sleep is key, right? So again, we've got diet, we've got exercise, we've got sleep. And if you get these three things right, that's going to move you forward in a big way in terms of well-being and feeling good in your body. Now, again, I think these are really important to kind of rule out a lot of what people end up going to therapists for before you go to therapy, before you go to psychedelic therapy, before you blah, 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 blah. Get these things right. Because if you suspect, for example, if you suspect you have trauma and you want to go do psychedelic therapy to resolve your trauma, but really you just feel like shit because you're mildly malnourished, because your diet is imbalanced and you don't sleep well, and you have inflammation in your body because you're not detoxing, you're not sleeping, you're not moving enough, what have you, then how do you know what's what, right? So I want to give some examples here of some common kind of conditions a therapist would be seen for that actually have very physical root causes. I think you'll be really interested in this. So let's go ahead and talk about a few examples here. And just a real quick comment before we go ahead and get into talking about some examples here. I do want to say that there is a certain circularity between physical health and emotional mental health. That's a piece of the puzzle here. So you may be wondering, well, isn't it possible for, say, trauma, someone going through trauma, for that to impact their physical health? And the answer to that would be yes. Apparently, there's quite a bit of research that shows that this is also another way it can go. So trauma can impact, for example, your epigenetic expression, the way your genes express through your body. And the way your genes express through your body will change, obviously, your physical health. And then that, of course, can impact the way you feel in terms of, psychologically, emotionally, mentally. So there is a circular thing here where your health, I think, also encourages better gene expression, encourages the expression of stronger, healthier genes. The more you're using your body in a way that really requires the best of it to show up, the more it's going to give you epigenetic expression that, really, gives you all it has. So that's going to be better mood and better focus, better attention, yada, yada, right? And then, of course, that feeds back into, your mental emotional health, which of course feeds back into continuing to make good life choices, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a circularity between trauma and mental emotional issues, things going on in your life, stress, and how that impacts your health and how that impacts your mental emotional state. So I just want to acknowledge that to be fair in the conversation here, because it's not just a linear thing. We are systems. We're actually systems inside of systems inside of systems. There are multiple nested layers of systems that are what a human being is, right? And so because of that, there are different ways we can create intervention to create healing and transformation and change. But I do think this is one of these areas of life to get right, because again, bang for the buck, biggest change for the least amount of effort. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about a couple examples here. And I want to start with depression and inflammation. So as far as I know, I'm pretty sure depression is the most widespread common mental health issue around, at least here in the United States, probably globally. There's more depression than anything else. And I do think there are issues to talk about in terms of what depression is. It's kind of a big, broad umbrella term that can mean a lot of different things. It can really host a lot of different types of symptoms and different root causes and whatnot. But a huge one that we know about now, and I would encourage you to go read about this, look this up. This is the thing, is the gut-brain axis, the connection between the gut and the nervous system, right? Through the vagus nerve. And what they found is inflammation in the body, particularly in the gut, particularly diet-driven inflammation from inflammatory foods. And this includes sugars, starchy carbs, low-quality oils, certain other things. When we have inflammation in the body, one of the effects it can often create is the experience of depression. So this is, if you have depression, you want to go to a therapist because you're depressed, first thing you should maybe do is look at your diet and cut out all the sugar, cut all the starchy carbs, cut out all the seed oils, cut out all the crappy packaged, whatever, candies and all that for a while, for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and see how you feel. See if you don't radically start to shift in the way that you feel in a short amount of time. I think that's only fair. I think that's only good due diligence on your part before you go ahead and pick up the phone and call a therapist and spend the money on it and the time on it and the tears on it, right? So this is a huge, huge thing. So diet and depression are deeply intertwined. And again, exercise, which, is better than SSRIs. So if you shift your diet and you start exercising, the impact that's going to have on whatever your depression is will be significant. Now, I'm sure there's some of you out there who are watching this and you're like, yeah, that's cool, but I know I know why I'm depressed. I know where it comes from. I know I went through had a crappy childhood or whatever it was. And that's still in me and I need to process it. Fair enough. But all I would say is, maybe if your diet or your lifestyle is amplifying that depression in any way, the smart thing to do is to rule that out first, to take that off the plate, to remove extra stressors and lighten your own load. It will make processing all this stuff easier. I will say, just from my own experiments with this, having played with, having a clean diet and then, having an indulgent streak and, kind of breaking it, that when I go back to sugar, when I go back to certain kind of junk foods, I've noticed different things, from being much more irritable. That's a very common one for a lot of people. I'll get really grumpy. I'll be more aggressive, more prone to say harsh things. I noticed that I'm more sensitive to other people's, slights or whatever, like getting cut off in traffic, and all of a sudden I'm like really upset about it. I've noticed that it's really easy for me to get into kind of a melancholy funk or dissociate, or depending on what I eat, have anxiety, panic attack responses. I went through a period where, and I'll explain more about this in a moment, where coffee, I didn't realize it was coffee, was giving me like extreme weird dizziness and panic responses. So get your diet right if you're dealing with depression or anxiety, because again, this could be a huge thing. And if you're going to a therapist and spending the money on it, but it's actually diet driven, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. Let me give you another couple examples here. Okay, another great example here that I want to illustrate, just kind of share a little bit about. This is something I've been exploring because it very much impacts my own health. So I'll be transparent here with you guys and say that I still have health issues I'm working out that definitely impact my mood, more so my cognition. Definitely have impacted sometimes the way I am on camera and show up for this channel. It's a theme in my life. It's part of me unwinding my own stuff. So this is something I'm looking at currently. And I would recommend you look at too, because this is another one that just blew my mind once I started to realize it. And so so another example here is if you have ADHD symptoms, especially if you have OCD symptoms, if you have OCD, if you have anxiety systems, if you have a lack of energy, like a chronic lethargic, low mood, low energy, low vitality, low strength, you have motivation issues or procrastination issues, you have just like a weak willpower to do the things you really care about doing in your life. Just as some examples, this can all be physical. This can all be driven by a couple things. So first of all, I would encourage you to look at what probably is the root cause of some of this, especially very tightly. I think there's an 80% correlation for OCD. So especially if you have OCD, you're going to want to look into this. Look at methylation. There's a gene and a gene mutation called the MTHFR. Some people call it the motherfucker gene. And this has to do with how we process nutrients in our body, things in our body, and there's a process of methylation involved. I don't know all the technicals, so I'm gonna spare you my harebrained attempt to try and describe it. But essentially, there's a process of methylation that goes on when we're processing things in our body, and if we aren't able to methylate properly, if either we are under methylators or over methylators, we will tend to have very significant, drastic differences in the way our body processes from the way it should. So this is a very common gene mutation. There's tons of people online talking about this stuff, tons of health coaches, tons of subreddits and forums all over the place of people struggling with this. The good news is you can get tests to find out if you are an undermethylator or overmethylator, or if you have this mutation. You can do home tests. You can go to a doctor and get a proper test. and you can start to figure this out. And there are supplements to help you if you have one of these problems. So this is something that can be adjusted and tweaked, which is the good news here. Downstream from methylation, this is another thing I really want you to be aware of, is histamine. All right, so histamine is a neurotransmitter in our body. You've probably heard of it from seasonal allergies, which is how most of us know about it. And histamine essentially is something that our body creates and generates, but also is created from our breaking down of food. So a lot of times histamine is very diet driven. So this is tightly correlated with like food sensitivities, having, rashy reactions to food, sleepiness to certain foods, having panic attacks after eating certain foods, or anxiety attacks. And again, ADHD, tightly correlated with this, NOCD, tightly correlated with this. So if your histamine levels are off, and again, same thing, you can get tests for it, you can look into it, it will dramatically impact things like your ability to focus, your ability to get things done, your willpower, your sense of well-being and health and safety, your sense of anxiety or not, your sense of depression or not, et cetera, right? So if you're, and I've worked with people who have OCD, for example, who, really are looking at it through a psychological frame and trying to fucking figure it out. And I understand how difficult it is to deal with those compulsions when you're in that place. But what if those compulsions are really downstream of either a genetic mutation or an imbalance in your histamine levels in your body that is really causing this compulsion, right? Or driving this compulsion, right? And what if when you shift it, it goes away? So in the case of histamines, this is an easy one to play with because you can take like a non-drowsy histamine, antihistamine like Claritin, and see, if your histamine level's too high because maybe your body isn't breaking all the histamine down, you could take an antihistamine and be like, do I feel better? Do I feel clear? Are my panic attacks gone? Is my blah, blah, blah. But here's the other thing. If you go too far in the other direction, it can also affect your mood and your cognition, all that other stuff too. There's other stuff like DAO enzyme to take if you are, have too much histamine in your body. And there's other things you can do. So this is something, again, to go to a doctor and really get blood tests, get blood work done on it, or at very least to research more, learn about, experiment with in a safe way. But these are things that, again, no therapist fucking tells you, that massively impacts potentially some of the most common mental health issues out there, right? So this is the kind of thing you should know before you, again, splash the money down and, invest months to years worth of your life into processing stuff. And you try, if you're barking up the wrong tree from the start, you're doing yourself a disservice. So as someone here to kind of inform you and serve you and help you, this is one of those things I wish I knew way earlier on. So please do yourself a favor, and before you get serious about therapy or coaching or whatever, zoom out and get these three things right: diet, exercise, and sleep. And, see what happens after that. See if you still feel like you have issues or there's still something going on there. But this is certainly a thing to work. And I think the bigger picture here, before we go ahead and wrap the video, is that, we can't just be looking at ourselves in this kind of Western scientific model of reductionism, of what's the one little root cause part and what are the few interchanging moving parts around this thing that are in this one paradigm, and that's what we need to fix in order to feel better. Sometimes that fucking works. Sometimes you relate to a human being the way a mechanic relates to a car. You fix the couple things that aren't quite working right and everything's great, right? But a lot of times we are much more complex than that. It's not that simple, right? You need to get lifestyle dialed in and be working all of these together, right? Your physical health, including diet and exercise and sleep, supports therapy if you do have to do therapy, right? And if you do have to do psychedelic therapy, same thing. You want to be in fine functioning order when you take a psychedelic. It's going to not only make it better and more fun and more blissful and more ecstatic, it's also going to be supportive of your ability to really just be present and feel safe and heal, right? So this all goes together, and some other factors here I'll just kind of mention off the cuff before we wrap. Social connection, huge. Are you socializing? Do you have social anxiety? Do you have friends? Do you have even one friend, that you can talk to and connect with, feel heard and seen and valued? Even an animal, a relationship with, a pet, right? That you have a bond with and you feel like you can relate to. Huge, right? Having connection with other beings, super important. Some other examples here. I think play. I think, having moments where you really let yourself go from all your worries and all your processing and all your obligations and all your fears, and you let yourself play. I think that's incredibly important, incredibly healthy. It's part of how we learn. It's part of how we adapt. It's part of how we de-stress. Some other examples here. Let me see. Lifestyle stuff. Yeah, hobbies, interests, having something to do that fascinates you and engages your nervous system and lights you up and, really brings out the joy and the mystery and the excitement in life for you, whatever that is. Reading, it's another big one. Using our ability to read, hold long form information so that we're not in TikTok brain all the time, et cetera, right? Get your lifestyle a bit more dialed in first is my message in this video, because it goes a long way towards your sense of well-being. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap it here. I'm going to shut up and just say many blessings to you, whoever you are, wherever you are. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this message serves you well. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'm sure I probably said something wrong in this video. Again, I'm not an expert in health, but certainly a path I'm walking myself. So much love to you, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.